The October air in Portland, Oregon carried that familiar bite of autumn as I laced up my cleats in the cramped locker room of Jefferson High School. The smell of wet grass and determination filled my nostrils while my teammates chatted nervously around me. Today was the state championship semifinal, and everything I had worked for over the past 4 years came down to this single match. My name is Jordan Martinez, and at 17, I had spent most of my life trying to prove myself worthy of wearing the number 10 jersey that hung on my shoulders. Soccer had been my passion since I could barely walk, but passion meant little to my father, Roberto Martinez, a successful construction company owner who viewed my dedication to the sport as nothing more than a distraction from what he considered real life. "Jordan, you ready for this?" called out my best friend and teammate, Noah Thompson, as he pulled on his goalkeeper gloves. Noah had been there through every practice, every game, every moment when I questioned whether I was good enough to make it to the next level. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, though my stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Through the small window of our locker room, I could see the stands filling with families, friends, and college scouts. My heart skipped a beat knowing that representatives from Oregon State University and Portland State were somewhere in those bleachers, clipboards in hand, ready to evaluate every touch, every pass, every decision I would make in the next 90 minutes. Coach Williams, a former professional player whose weathered face told stories of countless battles on soccer fields around the world, entered the locker room with his usual pregame intensity. "Gentlemen, we've worked 4 years for this moment. Lincoln High has beaten us twice this season, but today is different. Today we play with the heart of champions." I closed my eyes and tried to focus on his words, but my mind drifted to the conversation I had with my father just 3 days earlier. We sat in his office at Martinez Construction, surrounded by blueprints and the constant hum of machinery outside. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his desk as he leaned back in his worn leather chair. "Jordan, you need to understand something," he had said, his voice carrying that tone of finality I had grown to despise. "This soccer thing has gone far enough. You're 18 in a few months and it's time to start thinking about your future. Real opportunities, not pipe dreams." I remember feeling my chest tighten as I tried to find the right words. "Dad, I have scholarship offers. This isn't just a hobby anymore. I could play in college, maybe even professionally." He shook his head with a dismissive gesture that cut through me like a blade. "Professional soccer in America? Do you know how many kids think they're going to make it? You're wasting your time with this fantasy when you could be learning the construction business, building something real, something that will actually support you." The memory of his words echoed in my mind as Coach Williams continued his pep talk. "Martinez, you're our playmaker today. I need you controlling the tempo, finding those passes that others can't see. You've got the vision, now show them what 4 years of dedication looks like." I nodded, trying to push away the doubt that my father had planted in my mind. Around me, my teammates were going through their pregame rituals. Carlos Mendoza, our striker, was juggling a ball with the focus of a monk in meditation. Brian Kelly, our center back, sat quietly in the corner, visualizing defensive scenarios. These guys had become more than teammates over the years. They were brothers who understood the sacrifice and dedication required to reach this level. As we prepared to take the field, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror hanging on the locker room wall. The Jefferson High Eagles jersey fit me perfectly, the blue and gold colors representing 4 years of early morning practices, weekend tournaments, and countless hours spent perfecting my craft. My dark hair was longer than my father preferred, another point of contention between us, but it was part of who I was as a player. The walk from the locker room to the field felt like a journey through time. Each step brought back memories of freshman year, when I was barely 5'6" and weighed maybe 140 pounds soaking wet. Coach Williams had taken a chance on me then, seeing something that others missed. I remembered the countless hours spent in the gym, working with our strength coach to build the muscle and stamina needed to compete at this level. The crowd's energy hit us like a wave as we emerged into the afternoon sunlight. Jefferson's student section, painted in blue and gold, erupted in cheers that echoed off the surrounding hills of Portland. The Pacific Northwest landscape provided a dramatic backdrop, with evergreen trees stretching toward gray clouds that threatened rain but held back just enough to give us perfect playing conditions. I scanned the stands, looking for familiar faces among the sea of supporters. My mother, Carmen Martinez, sat in her usual spot behind our bench, wearing my number 10 jersey and holding a sign that read, "That's my son." Her unwavering support had been my anchor through years of my father's skepticism. Next to her sat my younger sister, Sophia, who at 15 already showed more athletic ability than I ever possessed. But the person I was looking for, the one whose approval I craved despite everything, was nowhere to be seen. My father had told me he would try to make it if his work schedule allowed, but as kickoff approached, his absence spoke louder than any words he had ever said about my waste of time. Lincoln High took the field with the confidence of a team that had dominated the league all season. Their record spoke for itself: 18 wins, 2 draws and only 1 loss. They played a physical, aggressive style that had intimidated every opponent they faced. Their star player, Michael Sterling, had already committed to the University of Washington and carried himself with the arrogance of someone who knew his future was secure. As we lined up for the opening kickoff, I felt the familiar butterflies in my stomach transform into focused energy. This was what I lived for, these moments when everything else faded away and only the game mattered. The referee's whistle cut through the afternoon air, and suddenly 4 years of preparation condensed into this single moment. The first 20 minutes of the match unfolded exactly as we had feared. Lincoln High came out aggressive, pressing high and forcing us into mistakes. Their midfield dominated possession, and their forwards constantly threatened our goal. Noah made 3 spectacular saves to keep us in the game, each one drawing gasps from the crowd and frustrated shouts from the Lincoln players. I found myself chasing shadows, unable to find the space and time I needed to create the plays that had made me our team captain. Every time I received the ball, 2 Lincoln defenders were on me immediately, forcing hurried passes or turnovers that led to more pressure on our defense. Coach Williams paced the sideline, shouting instructions that were barely audible over the crowd noise. Jordan dropped deeper. "Help us build from the back," he called out, but even dropping into our own half didn't give me the space I needed. Lincoln had clearly studied our game film and designed their strategy specifically to neutralize my influence on the match. 25 minutes into the game, disaster struck. A miscommunication between our center backs allowed Sterling to break through on goal. Noah came off his line to narrow the angle, but Sterling's shot was perfectly placed into the bottom corner. The Lincoln supporters erupted in celebration while our side fell silent except for the encouraging shouts of our families and friends. Walking back to the center circle for the restart, I felt the weight of 4 years pressing down on my shoulders. This wasn't how the story was supposed to end. All those mornings when I chose training over sleeping in, all those afternoons spent juggling a ball in my backyard while my friends played video games, all those conversations with college scouts who saw potential in my game, they couldn't lead to defeat in the semifinal. As we prepared for kickoff, I glanced toward the stands one more time, hoping against hope that I would see my father's familiar figure making his way to a seat. The empty space where he might have been sitting felt like a physical ache in my chest. In that moment, his words from 3 days earlier seemed prophetic rather than cruel. "You're just wasting time with this fantasy." The referee's whistle brought me back to reality, but as we kicked off again, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe for the first time in my life, my father was right. The second half began with Lincoln High maintaining their aggressive approach, but something had shifted in our team's mentality during the halftime break. Coach Williams had delivered one of his most passionate speeches, reminding us that champions aren't made in moments of comfort, but in moments of adversity. His words resonated through the locker room as he looked each of us in the eye. "Gentlemen, we're 45 minutes away from either the end of our season or the beginning of something legendary. Lincoln thinks they have us figured out, but they don't know what Jefferson Eagles are made of when our backs are against the wall." I had spent the 15-minute break trying to solve the tactical puzzle that Lincoln had presented. Their man-marking system was suffocating our creativity, but I noticed something in their positioning that might give us an opportunity. Their fullbacks were pushing high to support their attack, which left space behind them if we could switch the play quickly enough. The October sun was beginning to set behind the evergreen trees that surrounded our field, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured grass. The temperature had dropped just enough to make the air crisp and energizing, perfect conditions for the kind of fast-paced soccer that favored our style of play. 15 minutes into the second half, we finally found our breakthrough. Carlos had dropped deep to collect a pass from our center back, drawing his marker out of position. I saw the space opening up and made my run toward the penalty area, calling for the ball with the kind of urgency that had become second nature after 4 years of playing together. Carlos's pass was perfect, weighted just right to reach me as I arrived at the edge of the box. For the first time all game, I had a moment of space and time to make a decision. The Lincoln goalkeeper was positioned well, covering his near post, but I noticed that their center back had lost track of Brian Kelly, who was making a run toward the far post. Instead of shooting, I played the ball across the penalty area with the outside of my right foot. The pass skipped past 2 Lincoln defenders and found Brian perfectly positioned at the far post. His header was clinical, giving their goalkeeper no chance to react. The Jefferson supporters erupted in celebration, and for the first time in 60 minutes, I felt like we had a real chance to win this game. That's what I'm talking about. Noah shouted from his goal, pumping his fist toward our supporters. The momentum had shifted completely, and I could see the doubt creeping into Lincoln's players for the first time all afternoon. But soccer, like life, has a way of testing your character just when you think you have everything figured out. With 20 minutes remaining in the match, Lincoln responded with renewed aggression. Sterling, who had been relatively quiet since scoring the opening goal, suddenly came alive with a series of runs that stretched our defense to its breaking limit. In the 75th minute, he broke free again. This time, Brian made a desperate sliding tackle that caught Sterling's ankle just inside our penalty area. The referee's whistle was immediate, and his finger pointed to the penalty spot with no hesitation. The Lincoln supporters went wild while our players surrounded the referee, pleading our case, but the decision was final. I watched from the center circle as Sterling placed the ball on the penalty spot with the confidence of someone who had converted dozens of crucial penalties throughout his career. Noah stood on his goal line, bouncing on his toes, trying to guess which way Sterling would place his shot. The entire stadium fell silent except for the distant sound of Portland traffic and the rustle of autumn leaves in the surrounding trees. Sterling's run-up was deliberate and controlled. His shot was powerful and well-placed, heading toward the bottom right corner of our goal. But Noah had guessed correctly, diving full extension to his right and getting his fingertips to the ball. The save was spectacular, deflecting Sterling's shot off the post and out of play for a corner kick. The Jefferson supporters exploded in celebration, and I felt a surge of energy that seemed to lift our entire team. Noah's save had kept us level, but more importantly, it had broken Lincoln's psychological advantage. Sterling stood at the penalty spot with his hands on his hips, staring in disbelief at the goal that had somehow kept his shot out. With 15 minutes remaining, the game became a frantic battle between two teams desperate to avoid the heartbreak of defeat. Both coaches had made their substitutions, bringing on fresh legs to try to find that crucial third goal. The pace was relentless, with tackles flying and players pushing their bodies to the absolute limit of endurance. I found myself everywhere on the field, tracking back to help defend corner kicks, then sprinting forward to support our attacks. My legs were screaming with fatigue, but adrenaline and 4 years of conditioning kept me moving. This was what we had trained for, these moments when soccer stops being a game and becomes a test of will. With 8 minutes remaining, we earned a free kick just outside Lincoln's penalty area. It was in the perfect position for a direct shot, and Coach Williams was gesturing frantically from the sideline, indicating that he wanted me to take it. I had scored from this exact position twice during the regular season, but the pressure of this moment made it feel completely different. As I stood over the ball, I could hear my heart beating in my ears despite the noise from the crowd. Lincoln's goalkeeper was organizing his wall, placing his players strategically to cover the angles I might choose. Their defenders were marking our tall players tightly, expecting a cross rather than a direct shot. I took my usual 5 steps back from the ball and tried to visualize the shot I wanted to make. The goalkeeper was positioned slightly to his left, anticipating that I would aim for the far corner where most free kick specialists try to place their shots. But I had noticed throughout the game that he was slow to react to shots aimed at his near post, a weakness that might give us the opportunity we needed. The referee's whistle indicated that I could take the kick whenever I was ready. I approached the ball with the same technique I had practiced thousands of times in training, striking it with the inside of my right foot and trying to generate just enough curve to bend it around the wall. The ball left my foot with perfect contact, rising over the wall and dipping toward the near post exactly as I had visualized. For a moment, time seemed suspended as the ball traveled toward the goal. The Lincoln goalkeeper dove desperately, extending his body to try to reach a shot that was perfectly placed in the one spot where he couldn't make a save. The ball hit the inside of the post and bounced into the goal, sending the Jefferson supporters into absolute pandemonium. I was immediately buried under a pile of teammates who had sprinted from all corners of the field to celebrate. Carlos was screaming something in Spanish that I couldn't understand, but his joy was universal. Brian lifted me off the ground in a bear hug that nearly crushed my ribs, and Noah sprinted the entire length of the field to join the celebration. As I emerged from the pile of players, I looked toward the stands where my mother and sister were jumping up and down with tears streaming down their faces. The sight of their pure joy made this moment even more special, but I still couldn't help scanning the crowd one more time, hoping to see my father's face among the celebrating supporters. He wasn't there. Lincoln High had 5 minutes to find an equalizer, and they threw everything forward in desperate attacks that left them vulnerable to counterattacks. We had 2 clear opportunities to seal the victory, but both times our shots went just wide of the goal. The final minutes felt like hours as we defended corner kick after corner kick, with Noah commanding his penalty area like a general directing his troops. When the referee's final whistle echoed across the field, the relief and joy were overwhelming. We had done it. We had beaten Lincoln High 2-1 and earned our place in the state championship final. 4 years of work, sacrifice, and dedication had led to this moment, and as I looked around at my teammates celebrating with their families, I felt a satisfaction that I had never experienced before. But even in the midst of our greatest triumph, there was an empty space in my celebration. As my mother and sister rushed onto the field to embrace me, I couldn't help but wonder if my father would ever understand what this moment meant to me, what all of this had always meant to me. "I'm so proud of you, Mijo," my mother whispered in my ear as she held me tight. "Your father should be here to see this." "It's okay, Mom," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't really okay at all. The week between our semi-final victory and the state championship final passed in a blur of media attention, college scout meetings, and intense preparation. Jefferson High had reached the state final for the first time in school history, and the entire Portland community seemed to rally around our team. Local newspapers ran features about our journey, and the athletic department had to move the final to a larger stadium to accommodate the expected crowd. I spent Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop downtown meeting with Coach Peterson from Oregon State University. He was a distinguished man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect without being intimidating. We sat at a corner table overlooking the Willamette River, discussing not just my soccer future, but my academic goals and personal aspirations. "Jordan, I've been watching you play for 2 years now," he said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "What impresses me most isn't just your technical ability, though that's certainly exceptional for a high school player. It's your soccer intelligence, the way you see the game developing before it happens. That's something you can't teach." The scholarship offer he presented was more generous than I had dared to hope. Full tuition, room and board, plus access to Oregon State's excellent business program. It was everything I had dreamed of since I first started taking soccer seriously, a pathway to continue playing the sport I loved while getting an education that would set me up for success regardless of how far my soccer career might take me. "I need to discuss this with my family," I told him, though we both knew that the decision was really mine to make. "The championship final is Saturday, and then I'll be able to give you a definitive answer." Coach Peterson smiled and shook my hand firmly. "Take your time. This offer isn't going anywhere, and I want you to be completely confident in whatever decision you make. Just remember that opportunities like this don't come around often." Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of possibility and responsibility settling on my shoulders. This wasn't just about playing soccer anymore, it was about choosing the direction my entire adult life would take. Part of me was excited about the prospect of playing at the collegiate level, but another part was terrified of disappointing the people who mattered most to me. That evening, I sat in my bedroom staring at the Oregon State scholarship packet when I heard my father's truck pull into our driveway. He had been working late every night this week, trying to finish a major commercial project before winter weather made construction more difficult. I could hear him talking to my mother in the kitchen, their voices carrying that familiar tone of adults discussing things they didn't want the children to overhear. After about 20 minutes, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Jordan, can we talk?" My father's voice was quieter than usual, lacking the authoritative edge that typically characterized our conversations about my future. He entered my room and sat down on the chair at my desk, looking around at the soccer trophies and team photos that covered my walls. For the first time in years, he really seemed to be seeing them, taking in the accumulation of achievements that represented my dedication to the sport he had always dismissed. "Your mother told me about the scholarship offer from Oregon State," he began, his hands clasped in his lap. "She also told me that there are other universities interested in recruiting you." I nodded, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "Coach Peterson thinks I have a real chance to succeed at the college level. The academic program is excellent, and it would cover all my expenses." My father was quiet for a long moment, studying the team photo from our sophomore year when we had made it to the regional semifinals. "Jordan, I need to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully." He looked directly at me for the first time since entering the room. "When I was your age, I had dreams too. I wanted to be an architect, to design buildings that would stand for centuries and inspire people. I was good at it, really good. I had been accepted to the University of Oregon's architecture program with a partial academic scholarship. This was the first time my father had ever shared anything about his own dreams and aspirations. I had always assumed that construction was his first choice, something he had always wanted to do. But my father, your grandfather, needed help with his construction business. Times were tough and he couldn't afford to hire outside workers. He told me that architecture was a luxury we couldn't afford, that I needed to be practical and help support the family. So I gave up my scholarship and went to work with him. He paused and I could see something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It might have been regret or sadness or maybe just the weight of choices made long ago. I built a successful business and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But there isn't a day that goes by when I don't wonder what might have been different if I had followed my own dreams instead of doing what other people expected of me. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain beginning to fall against my bedroom window. October in Portland meant that winter was approaching, and the changing seasons always made everything feel more urgent and important. I've been so afraid that you would face the same disappointments I did that I tried to steer you away from anything that seemed too risky or uncertain. I thought I was protecting you, but I realize now that I was projecting my own fears and regrets onto your life. He stood up and walked over to my dresser, where my most recent team photo sat in a frame next to my MVP trophy from the district tournament. Your mother has been trying to tell me for years how talented you are, how much you've accomplished, but I was too stubborn and too afraid to really listen. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, overwhelmed by this unexpected vulnerability from a man who had always seemed so certain about everything. Dad, He held up his hand gently. Let me finish, son. I want to be at your game on Saturday. I want to see for myself what you've worked so hard to achieve. And whatever happens in that game, whatever you decide about college and your future, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. The conversation continued for another hour, with my father asking questions about soccer that he had never shown interest in before. He wanted to understand the tactical aspects of my position, the training regimen that had developed my skills, and the team dynamics that had brought us to the state championship final. For the first time in my life, I felt like he was really listening to me, seeing me as an individual rather than just his son who needed guidance. When he finally left my room, I felt a mixture of relief and anticipation that I hadn't experienced in years. The championship final would be important for many reasons, but now it carried the additional weight of being the first game my father would attend with a truly open mind. The next few days of practice were intense but focused. Coach Williams had studied film of our final opponent, Central Catholic, and developed a game plan that would capitalize on their tactical weaknesses while minimizing our own vulnerabilities. They were a strong, physical team with excellent organization, but they relied heavily on their star midfielder, Tommy Wilson, to create scoring opportunities. If we can limit Wilson's influence on the game, we force them to become one-dimensional, Coach Williams explained during our tactical session on Thursday. Jordan, I'm going to need you to track his movements and disrupt his rhythm whenever possible. It won't be glamorous work, but it might be the key to winning this championship. I understood the assignment and embraced the responsibility. This was what team captains do, they make whatever sacrifices are necessary for the good of the team. If containing Wilson meant fewer opportunities for me to create plays in the attacking third, so be it. Friday's practice was light, focused more on mental preparation and maintaining our fitness than on introducing new concepts. As we walked off the field after our final session, Noah fell into step beside me. You ready for tomorrow? He asked, though he already knew the answer from the focused intensity that had characterized my preparation all week. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I replied, and I meant every word. That night, I lay in bed visualizing different scenarios that might unfold in the championship final. I imagined making the perfect pass to set up the winning goal, scoring the crucial goal myself, or making the defensive play that would preserve a narrow victory. But more than any specific play, I visualized playing with the freedom and creativity that comes from knowing that the people who matter most are supporting your dreams. For the first time in years, I would take the field knowing that my father would be in the stands, not just physically present, but emotionally invested in seeing me succeed. That knowledge was more powerful than any tactical preparation or technical training. It was the foundation of confidence that every athlete needs to perform at their highest level. Saturday morning arrived with crisp, clear skies and the kind of energy that makes Portland feel alive with possibility. As I ate breakfast with my family, my father surprised me by wearing a Jefferson High Eagles t-shirt that he had apparently bought without telling anyone. I figured it was time to show some school spirit, he said with a smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. The championship final was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Providence Park, the home stadium of the Portland Timbers. Playing on a professional field was a dream come true, and as we arrived for our pre-game warm-up, I felt the magnitude of the moment settling into my consciousness. This was it. Everything we had worked for over 4 years would be decided in the next 90 minutes. Providence Park buzzed with an energy I had never experienced before. The professional stadium, usually home to over 20,000 screaming Timbers supporters, had been transformed into a cathedral of high school soccer. Nearly 15,000 people filled the stands, creating an atmosphere that rivaled any professional match I had ever watched on television. Our warm-up routine felt different on the pristine grass field where professional players had created countless memorable moments. Every touch of the ball seemed more significant, every sprint more purposeful. I could feel the eyes of college scouts, family members and soccer fans throughout Portland focused on our every movement. As we returned to the locker room for our final pregame preparation, Coach Williams gathered us in a circle for what would be his last team talk of the season, regardless of the outcome. "Gentlemen, 4 years ago, most of you were freshmen who could barely string 3 passes together without turning the ball over. Today you're 90 minutes away from being state champions. That transformation didn't happen by accident. It happened because you committed yourselves to something bigger than individual success." He looked around the circle, making eye contact with each of us. "Central Catholic is a good team, but they haven't faced the heart and determination that you've shown throughout this tournament. Play with joy, play with passion, and play for each other. The rest will take care of itself." The walk from the locker room to the field felt like a journey through all the memories that had brought us to this moment. I thought about freshman year when I was barely strong enough to compete with upperclassmen. I remembered the summer training sessions when the Portland heat felt unbearable, but we pushed through anyway. I recalled the heartbreak of losing in the regional semifinals the previous year, and how that disappointment had motivated us to work even harder. As we emerged into the afternoon sunlight, the roar from the Jefferson High supporters section was overwhelming. I immediately spotted my family in the stands behind our bench. My mother wore her customary number 10 jersey, and my sister held a sign that read, "State Champions 2024. But it was seeing my father, wearing his Eagles t-shirt and cheering enthusiastically, that sent a surge of emotion through my entire body. For the first time in my soccer career, my father was truly present, not just physically but emotionally invested in my success. The validation I had craved for years was written across his face as he applauded our entrance onto the field. Central Catholic took the field with the confidence of a program that had won 3 state championships in the past decade. Their warm-up routine was crisp and professional, and their star player, Tommy Wilson, carried himself with the swagger of someone who had already committed to play at Stanford University. Their coaching staff wore matching polo shirts and moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. As the captains met at midfield for the coin toss, Wilson looked me directly in the eyes with the kind of competitive intensity that separates good players from great ones. "Good luck today, Martinez. You're going to need it." I returned his stare with equal intensity. "We'll see about that." Central Catholic won the coin toss and elected to kick off, immediately establishing the aggressive high-pressure style that had made them successful all season. Their forwards pressed our defenders aggressively, forcing quick decisions and limiting our ability to build attacks patiently from the back. The first 15 minutes of the match were a tactical chess match, with both teams probing for weaknesses while being careful not to expose themselves to counterattacks. Wilson lived up to his reputation, constantly finding space between our midfield and defensive lines and threading passes that created dangerous situations for our defense to resolve. My primary responsibility was to limit Wilson's influence on the game, but he was proving to be every bit as elusive and creative as the scouting reports had indicated. Every time I thought I had him contained, he would drift to a different area of the field or make a run that pulled me out of position and created space for his teammates. 20 minutes into the match, Wilson finally found the breakthrough that Central Catholic had been building toward. He received a pass just outside our penalty area and in one fluid motion, turned and played a perfectly weighted through ball to their striker, who had timed his run to perfection. Noah came off his line to narrow the angle, but the striker's finish was clinical, placing his shot into the far corner of the goal. The Central Catholic supporters erupted in celebration while our side fell into stunned silence. We had prepared for this possibility, but being behind in the state championship final felt different from any other deficit we had faced all season. The pressure was magnified by the setting, the crowd, and the knowledge that our high school careers would end in disappointment if we couldn't find a response. Coach Williams immediately began gesturing from the sideline, encouraging us to maintain our composure and stick to our game plan. "We've got 70 minutes to make this right. Stay calm and play our game." The next 25 minutes tested every aspect of our character and preparation. Central Catholic sat back and absorbed our pressure, content to protect their lead and hit us on counterattacks when opportunities presented themselves. Wilson continued to orchestrate their attack with the precision of a conductor directing a symphony, always seeming to be one step ahead of our defensive adjustments. I found myself getting increasingly frustrated as my attempts to create scoring opportunities were consistently thwarted by Central Catholic's organized defending. Every time I received the ball in a dangerous area, 2 or 3 defenders converged on me immediately, forcing hurried decisions that resulted in turnovers or harmless shots from difficult angles. As we walked off the field at halftime, trailing 1-0, I could see the disappointment and concern in the faces of our supporters. My father's expression was particularly difficult to read, not disappointed, exactly, but intensely focused, as if he was finally beginning to understand the pressure and responsibility that came with being the player everyone expected to create magic. In the locker room, Coach Williams delivered one of the most passionate speeches of his coaching career. "Gentlemen, we are 45 minutes away from either the greatest disappointment or the greatest triumph in Jefferson High soccer history. Central Catholic thinks they have this game won, but they don't understand what we're made of when our backs are against the wall." He looked directly at me. "Jordan, I know you're frustrated, but this is when great players separate themselves from good players. Wilson is getting all the attention right now, but the game isn't over. One moment of brilliance can change everything." The second half began with Jefferson High playing with the desperation of a team that had nothing to lose. We pushed more players forward in attack, accepting the risk of being vulnerable to counterattacks in exchange for creating more scoring opportunities. The tactical adjustment immediately put Central Catholic under more pressure than they had faced in the first half. 15 minutes into the second half, our aggressive approach finally created the opening we needed. Carlos made a run down the right side of the field, drawing 2 Central Catholic defenders toward him. Instead of trying to beat them individually, he played the ball back to me at the edge of the penalty area. For the first time all game, I had a moment of space and time to make a decision without immediate pressure from multiple defenders. The Central Catholic goalkeeper was positioned well to stop a direct shot, but I noticed that Brian Kelly was making an unmarked run toward the far post. Instead of shooting, I played the ball across the penalty area with the outside of my right foot, finding Brian in perfect position to score his second crucial goal of the tournament. The Jefferson High supporters exploded in celebration, and I felt a surge of adrenaline that seemed to lift our entire team. We had found our equalizer, and more importantly, we had regained the psychological momentum that had carried us through the semi-final victory over Lincoln High. Central Catholic responded to our goal by abandoning their defensive approach and pushing forward in search of the goal that would restore their advantage. The final 25 minutes of the match became an end-to-end battle that showcased the highest level of high school soccer in Oregon. Both teams created multiple scoring opportunities, with spectacular saves from both goalkeepers keeping the score tied at 1-1. Noah made a point-blank save on Wilson that drew gasps from the entire stadium, while Central Catholic's goalkeeper made an equally impressive diving save on a shot from Carlos that seemed destined for the top corner of the goal. With 5 minutes remaining in regulation time, the match seemed destined for overtime. Both teams were showing signs of fatigue, but the intensity remained at championship level. Every tackle, every pass, every decision carried the weight of 4 years of preparation and the dreams of 2 communities. Then, with 3 minutes left on the clock, the moment arrived that would define not just the championship final, but my entire high school soccer career. Wilson, who had been relatively quiet since our equalizer, suddenly came alive with one final moment of brilliance. He picked up the ball in midfield and began a run that seemed to slice through our tired defense like a hot knife through butter. I was the last line of defense, the only player between him and a clear shot on goal. As Wilson approached me at the edge of our penalty area, time seemed to slow down. I could hear my own heartbeat over the crowd noise, and I could see the determination in Wilson's eyes as he prepared to make the move that would win Central Catholic the state championship. But 4 years of training, countless hours of one-on-one practice with Coach Williams, and the knowledge that my father was watching from the stands gave me the clarity and focus I needed in that crucial moment. Wilson tried to cut inside to his left foot, his preferred shooting position, but I had studied enough film to anticipate the move. I stayed patient, keeping my body between him and the goal, forcing him to take a more difficult shot from a tighter angle. When he finally pulled the trigger, the shot was rushed and sailed harmlessly over the crossbar. The missed opportunity seemed to deflate Central Catholic's confidence, while our team found a second win from successfully defending their best scoring chance of the second half. With 2 minutes remaining, Coach Williams made his final substitution, bringing on fresh legs to try to find the winning goal that would avoid overtime. The decisive moment came from an unexpected source. With 90 seconds left on the clock, Central Catholic had a corner kick that represented their last real opportunity to win the championship in regulation time. Wilson stood over the ball at the corner flag, preparing to deliver what could be the most important cross of his high school career. As the Central Catholic players jostled for position in our penalty area, I found myself marking Wilson at the near post. He had drifted forward to try to get on the end of his own corner kick, a clever tactical move that had caught our defense slightly off guard. Wilson's corner kick was perfectly placed, curling toward the near post where he was making his run. But as he leaped to meet the ball, I managed to get my head to it first, deflecting it away from goal and out toward midfield where Carlos was waiting. What happened next unfolded like a perfectly choreographed sequence that we had practiced hundreds of times in training, but never executed under such pressure. Carlos controlled my clearance and immediately played a pass up the right sideline to our substitute, Danny Rodriguez, who had only been on the field for 30 seconds. Danny took one touch to control the ball and looked up to see that Central Catholic's desperate corner kick had left them with only 2 defenders back. I was already sprinting from our penalty area toward theirs, and Danny's pass was weighted perfectly to find me in stride just past the halfway line. For the first time all game I found myself with space to run at the Central Catholic defense. Their 2 remaining defenders were backpedaling frantically, trying to buy time for their teammates to recover from the corner kick. The stadium noise faded to a muffled roar as I focused entirely on the ball at my feet and the goal that was growing larger with each stride. As I approached the penalty area, the Central Catholic goalkeeper made the decision to come off his line and challenge me directly. It was a calculated risk that could either result in a crucial save or leave his goal completely undefended. With about 20 yards between us, I had to make the most important decision of my soccer career. Instead of trying to dribble around the goalkeeper or take a powerful shot from distance, I chose to chip the ball with the inside of my right foot. The technique was one that Coach Williams had taught me during my sophomore year, but I had rarely used it in game situations because of the precision required. The ball left my foot with perfect contact, rising just high enough to clear the goalkeeper's outstretched hands and dropping just inside the far post of the goal. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the entire stadium held its breath as the ball traveled through the air toward what would either be the winning goal or a costly miss. When the ball hit the back of the net, the explosion of sound from the Jefferson High supporters was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The roar seemed to shake the entire stadium, and I was immediately buried under a pile of teammates who had sprinted the entire length of the field to celebrate. As I emerged from the celebration, I looked toward the stands and saw my father on his feet, screaming and applauding with tears streaming down his face. In that moment, I realized that he finally understood what all of this meant to me, what it had always meant to me. Central Catholic had less than 60 seconds to find an equalizer, but their spirit had been broken by the dramatic turn of events. They pushed forward desperately, but Noah and our defense stood firm, and when the referee's final whistle echoed through Providence Park, we were state champions. The next few minutes were a blur of celebration, tears, and pure joy. My teammates lifted me onto their shoulders as the Jefferson High supporters poured onto the field in celebration. Coach Williams, who had dedicated 5 years of his life to building this program, stood at midfield with his arms raised toward the sky, finally able to celebrate the championship that had seemed impossible when he first arrived at Jefferson High. When the official ceremonies began, I was announced as the tournament's most valuable player, an honor that felt surreal after spending most of my high school career in my father's shadow of doubt. As I held the MVP trophy above my head, I could see my family in the stands, and for the first time in years, my father's face showed nothing but pride and admiration. The bus ride back to Jefferson High was filled with singing, laughter, and the kind of pure happiness that comes from achieving something that once seemed impossible. As we pulled into the school parking lot, where hundreds of students and families were waiting to continue the celebration, I felt a sense of completeness that went far beyond winning a soccer championship. My father was waiting by his truck when I finally made it through the crowd of well-wishers and teammates. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of pride, respect, and perhaps a touch of regret for all the years he had failed to see what was right in front of him. "Jordan, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I spent so many years trying to protect you from disappointment that I never gave you the chance to show me how strong you really are. What you did today, what you've accomplished over these 4 years, that takes a kind of dedication and character that I never fully appreciated." He paused, looking down at the MVP trophy in my hands. "I was wrong when I said you were wasting your time. You weren't wasting anything. You were building something beautiful, and I was too stubborn to see it." We stood there in the parking lot, surrounded by the celebration of our community, and for the first time in years, I felt like my father was truly seeing me for who I was rather than who he thought I should become. "So what happens now?" he asked, genuinely curious about the future that had suddenly opened up before us. I smiled and looked toward the horizon where the Portland skyline was illuminated against the darkening October sky. Now I call Coach Peterson and accept that scholarship to Oregon State. And then I keep working to see how far this dream can take me. My father nodded, and in his eyes, I could see not just acceptance, but excitement for the journey that lay ahead. Well then, I guess I better learn a lot more about college soccer. I've got some catching up to do. As we drove home through the streets of Portland, past the neighborhoods where I had spent countless hours juggling a soccer ball and dreaming of moments like this, I realized that winning the state championship was only the beginning. The real victory was earning my father's respect and support, and knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead in college and beyond, I would face them with the confidence that comes from proving yourself when it matters most. The kid who had been told he was wasting his time had just been named the most valuable player of the Oregon State Championship. Sometimes the best response to doubt isn't words, but simply refusing to give up on the dreams that make you who you are. And as the lights of Portland twinkled around us in the gathering darkness, I knew that this was just the first chapter of a story that was far from over.